Right, a call now on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Alcohol Reform Bill, committee stage continued.
I declare the House in committee for further consideration of the Alcohol Reform Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. The House is in committee. Kia ora tātou, no reire te whare, inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawe wha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, honourable members. Now, we are in committee on the Alcohol Reform Bill. Now, members, before we commence the debate on part 1, I need to correct the vote on the minimum age for sale and purchase. The vote for 18 years is 68, not 69. The vote for 20 years remains 53. The record will be amended accordingly. So the question now is that part 1 stand part, which is debate on clauses 3 through to clause 8. I call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to take a call on part 1, the preliminary matters, and I guess this is a very important part of the bill because it sets up the substance of what the legislation is designed to achieve. And I just want to reflect on the purpose of the legislation for a start, and then to talk about the objects clause, which is part 4. The purpose is to ensure that the legislation itself is for the benefit of the community as a whole. And I think that that's a really important statement to have in the legislation, but unfortunately there are many communities throughout New Zealand who will feel that this law does not go far enough in order to address the many concerns that they have raised. In my time in Parliament, I have never seen so many communities take to the streets to protest against the issuing of licences, as has been the case in the last couple of years. So we've seen people in South Auckland, we've seen people in Porirua, we've seen people in Christchurch, we've seen people in different parts of the country all taking a very strong stand when they see another licensed premise open up for business, or proposed to be open for business. And I think that the Liquor Licensing Authority itself, when one looks at the decisions that they have been making over the years, that they too are actually starting to see and respond to what is quite a serious concern coming from the community. And it certainly is driven by the community, which is why we're pleased to see the expression for the benefit of the community as a whole as one of the principal statements right up there in the purpose of the clause. The purpose goes on to say that it's to put in place a new system of control over the sale and supply of alcohol, and I guess we've moved on in terms of the language. The previous law was around the sale and supply of liquor, and then it talks about the characteristics that are set aside, established in subsection 2, which describes the characteristics of the new system as being reasonable, and its administration helps to achieve the object of this Act. And in a way, I could actually say that the characteristics of the new system aren't going to be deemed reasonable just by definition or the use of the language in the legislation. It will be how it's actually implemented on the ground. And that was a fundamental flaw in the Sale of Liquor Act, was that it in fact had a very strong purpose statement, but that purpose was not reflected in any way, shape or form in any of the elements of the legislation. And so looking for harm reduction measures in the legislation as it exists today, you'd be hard pressed to find them, and that's been one of the challenges that the Liquor Licensing Authority has had to face. The other element is to reform more generally the law relating to the sale, supply and consumption of alcohol so that its effect and administration help to achieve the object of this Act. And again, I think that it's very important to reflect that the legislation is only part of the story. It cannot ever be the whole story. I think my husband uses a very good expression which I use from time to time, and that is that red lights don't stop trains. As a former train driver and now a lawyer, he's certainly seen the practical implication of that particular expression. But what it means is that you can have all of the lights showing red, but that's not going to stop the train from crashing through a barrier or stopping in time to prevent disaster from occurring unless those brakes are applied by somebody in time. And that is what this law is actually all about as well. We've got a framework piece of legislation for the legislative framework, but it does require for the community to take responsibility for the behaviour that we have seen associated with the consumption of alcohol and the damage that it has done to communities. And I think that the community is facing up to that responsibility, and that's why we've seen them take to the streets in droves. That's why we've seen so many people make submissions to the Law Commission report. 3,000 New Zealanders took the time to make submissions on something that really mattered. This is, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
This is certainly a major change. It's a major change in direction and philosophy, and I believe that the community is wanting Parliament to do a lot more than this legislation allows. And then I move on to the object clause. The object of this Act is that the sale, supply and consumption of alcohol should be undertaken safely and responsibly, and the harm caused by the excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol should be minimised. And then it goes on to describe what the harm minimisation is about. And I think this is when we start to see the dollars and cents that actually lie with the approach that we might be adopting if we actually went further than we are doing. Any crime, any damage, death, disease, disorderly behaviour, illness or injury directly or indirectly caused or directly or indirectly contributed to by the excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol. That's every car smash on the street, every car smash leading to death, that is leading to injury. Think of all of the costs that are put on our ACC system, all of the costs that are put on our health system. Then look at the crime. I just want to remind the House that the government held, the previous national government before the last election, held a ministerial meeting on the drivers of crime, and they held that back in March 2009. It was actually one of the important initiatives that Simon Power and Peter Sharples, the Honourable Peter Sharples, put together to try and get some group of people together to think about what were the drivers of crime. Mr Chairman, alcohol came up time and time again, not so much as a cause, but as a driver, as one of those fueling, it's kind of like the petrol that is set alight, and all of the domestic violence, all of the abuse of children, all of these things were all tied back in many respects to the damage caused by alcohol. And then you come up with fetal alcohol syndrome and things like that. And so you see the harm that's done. So the Labour caucus took a very hard decision. We decided that actually the ministerial meeting on the drivers of crime was so important that we would offer to work with the government collaboratively on those drivers of crime, particularly focusing on children 0 to 12, in order to get a cross-party agreement on how that might be addressed, and not to look for elections with the rules changing every time there's a change of government, but to actually get a collaborative response around the 0 to 12. And what a difference that would make. And actually we would have been 3 years down the track of that by now if the government had responded in a slightly better way than we received. Simon Power wrote back to me on the 16th of November and he said, following decisions made by Cabinet and the National Caucus, I would like to propose a policy matter upon which initial cooperation could commence, that being the sale and supply of alcohol. I consider that this is an appropriate starting point in light of your previous role in bringing the sale and supply of liquor and liquor enforcement bill before the House, and the need to ensure that the legislative framework is coherent and enduring. This in no way precludes further cooperation on other policy issues relating to the drivers of crime if working together on the alcohol issue proves to be mutually agreeable. Well, I have to say that it hasn't been mutually agreeable because there hasn't been an engagement over what this legislation should contain. That actually stopped after that letter was received, and when the Law Commission reported back, the one advantage that I obtained was that I was enabled to have an embargo copy of the report so that I could read it over the weekend before it was publicly announced. But apart from that, the government did not consult with us about the fact that they were going to vote out the bill that I had introduced, the Sale and Supply of Liquor and Liquor Enforcement Bill, vote it out, get rid of it, and then introduce their own bill that does almost nothing more than what we already had in the legislation. And for anyone who's going to get up in this House and say that local communities are looking for their local community plans, well, they're 2 years overdue because the government voted out the bill that would have delivered them 2 years ago in December 2010, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr Chairman, so in 2010 the government made the decision not to pursue the government made the decision not to proceed with the Sale and Supply of Liquor and Liquor Enforcement Bill. And as we go through the different parts of this bill, we are going to establish that in fact there is almost nothing additional in this bill compared to what was in that bill. And there was no reason why the government couldn't have made slight amendments to that bill and it would have been passed by now. It would have been passed before the last election, and every single community in New Zealand would have been able to go to their local council and ask for the local alcohol plan provisions to be given effect to. We know that there are councils throughout New Zealand that want to get on with the job, but they have been delayed by this government's decision to change the name of the legislation and put it in their name, having for some reason absolutely beyond my comprehension decided not to proceed with the legislation that had already gone to a select committee, had already had submissions on it, and had already received significant support from one end of the country to the other. And it did seem a complete waste of everyone's time to require them to go back through that process again. And in fact, because of the proximity of that legislation going through the select committee and the Law Commission actually looking at the whole issue, there weren't as many submissions to it because people were in general agreement with it. And the huge advantage of that piece of legislation was that it would have enabled us to deal with the alcohol-related blood alcohol content issue, which of course is not being dealt with in the context of this bill, but which will be dealt with by way of a supplementary order paper when we get to a new part being moved by my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway. And I think it is a real shame that the government has chosen to take this approach when I have a very promising letter dated the 16th of November 2009 with Simon Power, really very interested in working collaboratively with us, and then finding that actually collaboration doesn't mean anything when it comes to alcohol. And I don't believe that this House has really taken on board the object of this Act until we get to the later parts of the legislation, and we keep coming back to the object. Is it going to minimise the harm caused by excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol? Are we going to see a reduction in crime? Are we going to see a reduction in damage, death, disease, disorderly behaviour, illness or injury directly or indirectly caused or directly contributed to by the excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol, and any harm to society generally or the community directly or indirectly caused or directly or indirectly contributed to by any crime, damage, death, disease, disorderly behaviour, illness or injury of that kind previously described. And that to me is the essence of the debate that we have to have in this House. It's what the people of New Zealand are asking us to have, an honest, open debate. We have to show courage in this House, and we have to be prepared to make hard decisions about what would make a difference in terms of the availability, in terms of the very low price, in terms of the issues that are not being dealt with in this bill. The public are asking, why are they not being dealt with when this is the object of the Act? If we truly come back to the object in this part of this bill, every single time we deal with a different part of this bill, we will find that it's not going to live up to the expectation that the people of New Zealand are asking us to represent. And I'm surprised that the only issue that members have wanted to exercise some independence on is the question of age, when we know that age is the least important of the 5 separate issues that we have been challenged to seriously look at by those who have expertise in this field. So I believe that as we go through this debate, we will have the opportunity to debate the important matters, but only because people have had the courage to put up supplementary order papers in their own names and to take on board the attacks that will come from industry, particularly the grocery and retail sector, and also the large breweries. Even the Hospitality Association doesn't think this bill goes far enough, and that to me says it all. There are many people out there who are relying on New Zealanders, relying on Parliament to get this right. We didn't get it right in 1989. We certainly didn't get it right in 1999. Let 2012 be different.
I call the Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, the 1989